Yes.
All right, good morning and welcome to Interim Topics for Corporations for the 2022 Interim. LSO has provided committee members a list of things which were referred to us from online and things dropped off to LSO. As you'll see, there's a description of each topic, a legislator's name, and a contact person. As you'll remember from previous year's committee, just because your name is on top of the topic, I've learned doesn't mean you know anything about it. And I've seen one of those with my name on it going, I'm not sure where that came from, and wasn't discussed. So what I kind of intend to do is just start with this list, go through and look at the contact people and ask them to give a quick 1-minute rationale, let's say, of why that topic should be before corporations, and then let the committee ask me questions. We'll keep track of kind of all the topics, and then I think Mr. Co-Chairman will probably have some discussion in the committee. I have to leave at 9 because apparently I'm the only one on corporations that's on the Redistricting Conference Committee, and so I'll leave it in your capable hands then. And if we need to,
Chairman have veto power over time.
For the first 55 minutes, and then we can either do a voting or a conversation and try to narrow it down to not 32 topics. So first up, under my name, update to medical malpractice claims reporting from the Department of Insurance. And then also, Commissioner, you have an anti-rebating statute you'd like to talk about, so maybe we can just do both those at once, and anything else from the Department of Insurance in one package. So welcome, Commissioner Rood, floor is yours.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. It's Jeff Rood, the Insurance Commissioner Committee. We brought those two topics, the update in medical malpractice insurance reporting. We really need to modernize it. Back in the 90s and in 2005, there were some medical malpractice issues throughout the state, and there weren't very many insurance providers. And so the statute laid out information that they deemed we should ask for to assess the market, see if it's viable, and if the state needed to take further action. Since then, the U.S. Department of Health has a mandatory reporting requirement for the same materials, just in a different format. And we also have an NAIC report that I can get at any day of the week that gives us a market analysis. So I'd like to update this provision, allow us to use those other industry databases, which are easier certainly on us, but certainly easier on industry, because they wouldn't have to report things twice and it wouldn't have to be in a different format. And then then this material still would be put together in our annual report that we submit every year. So that's the first. If there's any questions, if not, the second is I'd like to update our anti-rebating statutes. They are 40 or 50 years old. They're fairly draconian. Most states have updated them. And right now, for example, if an insurance agent wants to give a gift of any value to anyone who is a current client or a potential client, it's strictly prohibited. And so we get questions, for example, I'm an agent, I want to sponsor a Little League team. Can I do that? And we have to ask questions like, well, is the coach of the team also one of your clients? And we would like to do what other states do, come up with de minimis value, separate what's in the contract from what's not, and just make that a little more workable for the agents and clearer for everyone involved. So with that, I'll stand for questions.
Questions, committee, for the Insurance Commissioner? While I haven't anything else on insurance, the committee wishes to proceed with or talk about for the interim. I know we have 3 or 4 bills that came before us. Nothing NAIC accreditation.
Not this year, and maybe not even next year, Mr. Chairman.
Wow.
Life's
all right.
Good.
For that, thank you, Commissioner. We'll take those 2 topics in line. Next up, Senator Scott, the sunset date of the telecommunications statute.
Mr. Chairman.
Go ahead.
This is
Can somebody turn on Charlie's mic?
I got it. Mr. Chairman, this is what has been a major act for us. It's sunsetting, and I think that in and of itself is sufficient to have us review it. I think there's still some residual functions that need to be done. I know there's problems occasionally with the landline service. There's problems with areas of the state that are not served. We've discovered from experience that the satellite phones that are available in some places simply don't work very well. Problems with the latency that frankly have interfered with their working quite a bit. And that's a basic physics problem you can't solve. But there are areas with very poor coverage yet. So, Mr. Chairman, we do need to have a look at that. And the question, I think, is, does the committee want to do it, or do I do it as a private bill? Because it does need to be done. And you can see in the write-up, there's some interaction with the feds that may be important.
And then Mr. Hendricks was a contact person. I don't know, do you have anything to add, Jason? Come on down.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, Jason Hendricks with Range. We're a communications provider in a number of areas of the state. Yeah, the act sunsets on July 1st, 2023. And so I do think that we need to look at it, the impact on wholesale and retail customers. And as Senator Scott mentioned, there are things that are delegated from the FCC to the state that if the act sunsetted would revert back to the feds. Do we want that to happen, or do we want to retain some oversight in that? And then there's the universal service issues that I think at least need to be examined on whether it should be retained or be repurposed. On the competition in certain areas, yeah, from what I've heard, certain technology is not the best technology in some of the more rural areas, not wide availability. So let's look at the competition on some of those things. And then there's just the oversight on service quality and outages availability. Do we want to retain any of that stuff with the commission? I think that we would get to a point where there are certain things that probably could be eliminated. I think there are certain things that most people would want to retain. And then I think there are the controversial things that we would just have to have a policy call on how the state wants to move forward.
Any questions for Mr. Hendricks? Seeing none? All right, thanks, Jason. Next up, Representative Duncan, workforce housing.
We have three topics workforce.
That has your name on it, so I just thought I'd check with you first if you wanted to give it an intro, and if not, we can call the realtors up.
Yeah, we have, I think, 3 different submissions. First of all, there is a shortage of inventory, but the other part of it is a shortage of affordability or attainability. There seems to be plenty in most of our areas for low income, and upper income, but there's the middle housing is what's missing. And so we need to look at what's driving this. One of the deeper dives that we could do is assist in this. We could also talk about the different zoning barriers or ordinance issues. I know in my downtown, there's a parking ordinance that requires two parking spaces per unit. And there's several businesses up above the businesses that could be transformed into lofts or apartments or something easily. But the private sector can't invest in that and do that because of some of the regulations and restrictions. So I think if we look at some of that direction, and also another option and idea is, we've circled around to it before and it's failed, is the mitigation rates that some municipalities put on building. Some of them, their lots, they expand the lots rather than making them smaller for denser housing. There's some restrictions also maybe in helping some of these Main Street areas that we have across the state, that in different buildings and things that could be rehabbed into transitional housing or any sort of workforce type housing. with some assistance if there was some sort of help, whether it's tax incentive or whether it's a, just help with some of those zones regulations.
Okay, and then Representative Roscoe, one of the topics for the workforce housing's on your name. Anything you wanted to add?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I do think there's a lot to learn from other counties, how they're approaching it. I know that there are building restrictions or building requirements for new private enterprises coming in that they can supply some of their own workforce housing. And I know one county is doing that. But it's a serious problem in a lot of counties that's actually affecting the economic bottom line of having workers. And then also, we're losing snowplow drivers and highway patrol and people like that. We have one sheriff living in one of my counties, and all the other ones cannot live in my county. And so I think there's public land that can be looked at as well. And teachers are having a lot of problems as well. So it's just a large problem we should look at. And they are looking at housing right within their own, within the school districts that they can use. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Representative Duncan?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Quick follow-up. There's also some thoughts and ideas out there of, we always talk about some of these school sections that are sitting there and we can't do anything with. There's also thoughts about doing some sort of a workforce subdivision with deed restrictions, where the state actually benefits from something like that, especially in the county that our friend is from. And so there's some different, there's some different types of ideas. And one county in particular took an idea where they had a private person donate the land, and then they did the same thing as a Habitat for Humanity idea, but instead they did it at the middle housing level of the 200,000 plus in Cody area, where it's a deed restriction of 10 years minimum, and then those people have to help construct and build and do some sweat equity with it, also with their neighbors. And so there's a lot of great ideas out there that maybe
Senator Scott?
In addition, you've got a balance between some of the municipal functions and some of this. My city manager tells me that a key is availability of water and sewer and road connections at an affordable level, and that the shortages are driving the builders to just do the high-end ones. And so there's a balance, Mr. Chairman, between what can be publicly provided and the kind of housing you can get. And that, I think, we'll need to look into this time.
I think that's much more of a government interest when we talk about workforce housing as infrastructure the government can help with. Senator Ogden, one of these topics is yours.
I think we've kind of covered it too long. I'd like to see the topic just as wide as possible, because it does. Infrastructure plays a key role. If a town comes in and does a loop road and curb and gutters, all of a sudden you see things appear. It makes a big difference. And I think this needs to be as broad as possible. It's going to get uncomfortable for some of them because it's going to run into some home rule stuff. But I think the state needs to take a dive. It doesn't matter if you're in Hewlett or Jackson or Sheridan or Cody. Workforce housing plays a key role in whether you can attract a business to town or not. And I think this is economic development. If we want this committee to have an impact on the state, this is probably one of our key topics.
Mr. Chairman?
Senator Case?
Well, if we're going to do this, could we also spend a little time at the high level of seeing if government intervention in the housing markets even works?
That's part of it.
Yeah, I mean, really. Does it discourage private sector participation? And I'm sure we can get some background on that.
That's exactly right. Like I said, it's going to get into home rule. We need to talk about top to bottom, about the impacts and effects, how we do it. And that goes clear back to public grounds and partnerships to do it. How do we develop?
So audience,
And in all the meetings we can get on.
Sure sounds like there's pretty strong consent from the committee, so unless there's anything anyone needs to add, if you're here for that topic, it sounds like it's going pretty well. All right, with that, Representative Brown, are you here? Apparently dissolution of county clerks is under my name. County clerks, I don't have anything to talk about there, but you might want to see Representative Brown. Not sure why that one's under my name.
You don't know what he had in mind. Everybody's asking the same thing.
Some days around here, right?
Next topic.
Next up is Representative Roscoe. You have a topic on open primaries. Mr. Gruber brought that. Anything you wanted to say, or I'll call him up if he's here? Mr. Gopi? Oh, you're just, good to see you, Nick.
You're about to get primary.
Mr. Chairman, that, if Mr. Gruber is here, that would be great. If not, I can
Mr.
explain a little
Chairman?
bit.
Yep,
Mr. Gruber's online. Shall I admit him?
sure, throw him on. And then if anyone else, I know there's a couple similar topics, so if anybody else is here to talk about open primaries, you just come to the table now.
Four ranked
More than
choice
a couple.
coming after it.
So we'll do a quick survey of the field if we want to spend time this interim on similar topics to last interim. And where he's being admitted. Welcome, Mr. Gruber. You get about 1 minute. Let's talk about open primaries. Floor is yours. But you are on mute, sir. So if you would unmute, we'll try it again.
All right.
Perfect.
Apologies. Thank you for the opportunity to testify before you this morning. My name is Jeremy Gruber. I'm the SVP of Open Primaries. We're a national nonpartisan group that conducts research and educates the public about primary election systems. We work with citizens, nonprofits, and legislators across the country on how to improve elections to operate in the best interest of voters and to serve as a resource to you and to others in the state on this discussion. We've been following this debate in Wyoming, and I'm here to support and encourage study and analysis on ways to improve the primary election process to ensure it is as fair, equitable, and meaningful as possible. Wyoming is one of only a handful of states with what is called a semi-closed primary system, where unaffiliated voters may register with a party at the polls on primary election day. Only 6 states have this form of primary, and none of them are Wyoming's neighbors. This study topic is an opportunity to change that by analyzing voter registration, participation, and other data, and devising a solution specific to the needs of Wyoming voters. Many states are already going through this process. In the last few years, several have made significant changes to their systems, including Alaska and Colorado, and at least a third of all states in the country are now actively studying how to improve their primary elections. Many of the ways that they are studying open and nonpartisan primaries are among several of the practical, cost-effective ways to deal with some of the problems Wyoming voters are facing in the current semi-closed primary system. And the goal of this study topic would be to see if voter participation could be improved, to allow voters to vote for the best candidate, to improve voter choice overall, and to make sure that elections are as meaningful as possible for Wyoming voters. I encourage you to consider this topic, and I'm happy to support and be a resource in any way that would be helpful, and I'm happy to answer any questions you may have. Thank you.
Any questions for Jeremy? Seeing none. Thank you very much for being here this morning. And then committee, we have a couple of topics on like ranked choice voting, on how voting is conducted, but not necessarily on open primaries or the primary election. So I don't know if it's Ms. Lowe here, Jen? No.
Mr. Chairman, I don't think she is, but there's somebody else.
Oh, is there someone else? Welcome, Gail.
Mr. Chairman, Ms. Lowe is online and I just admitted her as a panelist.
Sure, but go ahead, Ms. Simons, because it takes 30 seconds to.
I've been asked by Gail Simmons, Sheridan County. Mr. Chairman, I've been asked by Jen Simon and Cynthia Ritchie Terrell on a related one, dealing with multi-member districts and ranked choice voting. I'll leave it to Jen Lowe to talk about the ranked choice voting. From 1978 to 92, women led the way in electing women to office. What changed in 1992 is that we went from multi-member districts to single-member districts. And so the whole idea of multi-member districts provides us with a broader representation of the populace and provides for a more robust governing capability. And I would like to point out that with the exception of Fremont County, all of our county commissioners are multi-member districts, and I would say that they are probably the most effective governing body within the state. And I would attribute that in part to multi-member district.
Any questions for Gail? Seeing none, Jen, welcome. You can have the floor for a minute. Anything on open primaries or ranked choice voting? Floor is yours.
Good morning, Mr. Chair and committee members. Jen Lowe, Equality State Policy Center. Thank you for the time today. A major theme of this budget session seems to be improving Wyoming's election system, ensuring that winners have a majority of votes. I had submitted a study interim topic for ranked choice voting. It's a system of voting where the winner is guaranteed a majority. There is recent data out of Utah, which has allowed ranked choice voting at its municipal levels, that voters like it and don't find it confusing. And I think it would be worthy of at least looking into to see if this is a system that would work in Wyoming. Open primaries is also an interesting topic, though something that I think would have a tougher time. I would be interested in learning more about it. And so that's really all I have. I'm welcome to answer any questions you might have.
Questions for SPC? Seeing none. Mr. Cannon from Fair Vote Action. Is he online or in the audience? Anyone else here that wants to talk about either open primaries or ranked choice voting? Okay. Seeing none.
Mr. Chairman, I do have someone, a Matthew Germer with his hand up online. Let me admit him.
Sure, bring him in. We'll wait just a second. And after that, we'll go to development agreement. Representative Duncan, after we're done with this topic. Welcome, Matthew. Floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. My name is Matthew Germer. I'm a researcher at the R Street Institute. We are a think tank focused on free markets and limited government across a variety of policy areas, including elections. I'm speaking to you today because I submitted a request to study ranked choice voting, particularly within the concept of municipal elections as an interim topic. I will spare you the long background on ranked choice voting, as it seems like you've become familiar with it in the recent times and due to previous testimony. I will point out that in addition to what you just heard, ranked choice voting does come with some additional potential benefits in that voters can show support for more than one candidate if that's what they prefer. They also don't have to worry about the spoiler effect if they prefer a lesser known candidate, and that all of this can be done while showing respect for taxpayers by avoiding additional runoffs. As was mentioned by the previous testifier, Utah has implemented ranked choice voting for their local elections, and this has been well received by their voters. I also want to point out that there has been, across the country as this topic's been discussed, confusion or worries about voter confusion. I think it's a good question. I'll note that in my research on the topic, I have found that voters are not confused by ranked choice voting, and that, as was brought up with the poll from Utah voters, an overwhelming majority said that they found ranked choice voting to be easy. Wyoming, in my understanding, is in a great place to explore this, particularly in the context of the nonpartisan municipal elections in the state, where voters might find that multiple candidates are aligned with their interests, and this gives them a way to express support for more than one candidate. I encourage the committee to study this topic over the interim. I'm happy to serve as a resource for the committee. And with that, I thank you for your time.
All right. Thank you. Any questions for Mr. Germer? Representative Roscoe, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Gerber, I was just wondering if there's any connection for this committee to think about between open primaries and ranked choice voting. And I have heard that maybe they go well together. One facilitates the other two a little bit, but I didn't understand that myself. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Germer, thoughts on that?
Mr. Chair, there is a good overlap between open primaries and ranked choice voting. It might be worthwhile for the committee to investigate both simultaneously, particularly in the context. I know there are ideas out there of allowing for open primaries, perhaps finding the best 4 or 5 most popular candidates in an open primary, placing all of them on the general election ballot and allowing voters to decide who they like best using ranked choice voting. This is a system that was recently approved by the voters in Alaska and will be tried in the next election. We don't yet have the on-the-ground experience to have me provide for you as a researcher how well that has been received. But based upon the implementation of open primaries and ranked choice voting separately elsewhere, my expectation is that it will be well received by the voters.
Okay. Anything else in open primaries or ranked choice voting? If they go hand in hand or if they don't? Okay, moving down the list. We talked about legislation to enable development agreements. Representative Duncan, any more on that? Or I don't know, Mr. Newcomb's here and wants to talk? Nope, go ahead, Representative Duncan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm not sure if Mr. Newcomb is online or not, but I would throw this into the infrastructure part of our conversation about workforce housing. It's a tool for counties, communities to be able to use.
Anyone here talk about development agreements? Seeing none. Next up, Independent Redistricting Commission. Representative Roscoe. Just couldn't get enough of redistricting. Want to talk more, huh? And if you'd bring Ms. Lowe back on, in case she wants to mention anything, go ahead, Representative Roscoe.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I do think Ms. Lowe would be a better person than I. However, since we all have gone through this torturous experience this summer, it does make a lot of sense to me, and it was brought up by several people. And in Montana, Idaho, Colorado, Arizona have this already, and so it is out there. There's examples to look at for the committee, and it seems to work pretty well. And it just takes the politician out of the picture and concentrate on the important thing, which is our population changes. So I would like Ms. Lowe to speak on this, if you would.
Ms. Lowe, anything to add?
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, committee members. Thank you, Representative Roscoe. I think that you can all attest that this was just a very difficult and challenging process. I think there's an easier way to do it. And I think at least investigating how an independent redistricting commission works is worthy of your time. There are different models to look at. Each state has a slightly different model, but I think we can find a model that works in Wyoming and gives you all back a bit of your time. Stand for any questions.
Questions, Ms. Lowe? Would you agree that the Wyoming Supreme Court is a good independent redistricting commission? Sorry. You don't need to answer that. Representative Roscoe, follow up?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I did just learn that I think in the Senate, there was a bill or a joint Senate joint resolution brought up by Senator Hicks and Senator Barlow. So there is more interest in it. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yep, go ahead, Senator Gage. It takes a second.
You guys help me get a microphone. Thank you. Mr. Chairman, I think this idea really does have merit. After everything we've been through, I think our first reaction is no, legislators can do it better because they know their districts and they know the people. But I think we get tripped up over things, and maybe we could work out a process that's kind of a sharing process. Certainly to have some independent folks work with our county clerks and other local officials to try to get a first brush at some of this, and then to have it come back for affirmation to the legislature. That makes some sense to me. So, I mean, frankly, it didn't work that well this time. And it wasn't this committee's fault or anything like that. It just, the times are different. People are nattier. I think we had an easier time when I was involved in it before. And so I would hope we'd give this some serious thought. It's something we want to do early on instead of trying to decide what to do when we get closer to redistricting next time. It really should be done now while it's fresh, and I'm thinking of some kind of a blended approach. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Could be cathartic for the committee after everything we dealt with this year to go through it. Next up, do you want to? Tracking dark money in politics under my name, but the contact person is Representative McGuire. Not exactly sure how that works. From my understanding, though, this came from the Wyoming Promise Group, and they've had, 22 states have had state resolutions to protest what I believe was the Citizens United case from 12 years ago now. I don't know if committee time needs to be taken up on that. I think we did 2 or 3 years ago look at that resolution, and it got through the House and didn't make it through the Senate. I'm not sure it needs 4 hours, but if anybody's here from Wyoming Promise that wants to talk about dark money in politics. Okay, next up, also under my name from Representative McGuire, review of political party lobbying, and basically making political parties register as lobbyists. And Representative McGuire is not here, but anybody here to talk about making political parties register officially as lobbyists? I think we have 3 political parties here. Are you all currently registered as lobbyists? The Libertarians are nodding that you are registered as lobbyists. Yeah, Ms. Russell, are you officially registered? Do you know if anyone else from the party is? And then I don't know the Democratic Party. Nope. So there's a topic we can consider. But also we consider technology issues on why the mics keep humming in here. After that, election code revisions from Ms. Wheeler or Mr. Schoen. This is technically under your name, Chairman Driscoll, but I imagine we always have election code revisions. Mr. Schoen, if you'd come forward, anything specific you want to see in election code revised?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Kai Schoen, the State Election Director and Secretary of State's Office. And we would certainly like to ask the committee to consider an election code revision bill, a general election code revision bill, where our office would work in collaboration with the county clerks on several topics. 3 that we've identified is looking at the absentee process and just early voting from the time of an absentee request to the time that absentee is delivered, looking at that process. Another one of interest is election records, providing a definition. Our office has certainly been inundated with public records requests, more than quadrupled. We have a certain staff member that's their entire job right now, is tending to those. I know the county clerks are getting inundated with public records requests. And so when election records were in the statute, it's been on the books for decades, and it was probably a pretty finite list of what election records were, likely voter registration forms, possibly candidate applications, and election results. There really wasn't much, 20, 30 years ago. And now with our sophisticated systems, we have so many different reports and things that can be available. And so there's some confusion on what is and can be made public and what isn't. So just looking at some definitions on what election records are. The third topic is just election timeframes and dates. For example, just a conversation about possibly moving, the primary election up a little bit earlier in the year, which would allow more time on the back end for canvassing, for recounts, for doing post-election audits and things of that nature. Certainly would take any questions the committee might have.
Any questions, Secretary of State's Election Division? Not seeing any currently. While we're on the issue, county clerks, anything in the election code revision area that you're seeking, but you're happy to assist with Secretary of State? Just wanted to make sure you wanted to nod in agreement on that. All right. Any questions from the committee on election code revisions? Seeing none. Next up, Representative Burt, a whole county plan for House District. Floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, co-chair, and rest of the committee. So obviously, we're continuing to talk about how redistricting went throughout the year. We're still working on it. On the floor, this is just another plan to look at and reconsider. I've got Andy Craig with me in the waiting room, who will also be able to go through some of the ideas. What this is going to be looking at is where we try to keep our counties whole. We've heard that often throughout the entire process where we didn't want to split up districts. We always wanted to kind of keep those counties whole. There's Andy. He can go through a little bit more detail, but what this does is it allows us to actually have our representatives elected by not really a population, but by a percentage of the population per the districts. And it helps kind of eliminate the redistricting confines that we have within trying to keep all those whole. So I'll let Andy go through and explain a little bit more. He kind of brought the language to me, so.
So before I turn over to Andy, just for my good Senate colleagues, Representative Burt has been added to the Corporations Committee. He took officially Representative Hunt's place. You'll remember Chairman Greer substituted for Representative Hunt through the interim. Chairman Greer has gone back to Minerals full-time, and Representative Burt is now a member of House Corporations. So, and Representative LeBeau came back to her original home committee after a small absence for redistricting. That was kind of smart looking back about it, Representative LeBeau. With that, Mr. Craig, go ahead.
Yes, thank you. And thanks to the committee and Representative Burt for inviting me. So this plan that we have put forward, or at least outlined.
Remind me who you're with, Mr. Craig.
Oh, sorry. I am a staff writer at the Cato Institute, where I cover election reform and election law issues.
Okay, go ahead.
The whole county's plan has its origins in the history of federal court rulings regarding Wyoming under the one man, one vote, 14th Amendment principles. So previously, and in fact still, the Wyoming Constitution provides for a county-based system of apportioning the House. That was struck down on the basis that the smallest counties were too small population-wise to justify that, and that the population variance was too high. And so that produced the system you use now, which is the two House districts nested with a single Senate district. And, you know, that has a lot of downsides when you're trying to draw districts of approximately equal population, particularly with Wyoming's geography, as the US Supreme Court even acknowledged in the 80s when they were taking up a case on this. You know, you have to grab a slice of one town and go, you know, 2 hours over into the next county to grab a slice of another town. And it's just, it can be very disruptive and not practical. So what we are proposing instead, or the outline we've submitted, would have a system where you use whole undivided counties as the basis of multi-member districts. And basically, if you do, depending on the exact number of representatives, there's a version of it that would work with 62 seats in the House. There's a version of it that would work with 74 seats in the House. We've checked out the math, and it's possible to do this in a way that you would not violate the one man, one vote rulings. And so that would, you know, it would be multi-member districts with a you portion based on population. So for, you know, Fremont County, for example, might have 4 or 5 representatives, depending on the example. Sweetwater would be combined with Carbon County in a single district, and that would have 6 or 7 representatives, again, depending on what size house you went with. And then the method for the general election for this, in order to ensure partisan fairness and also to have to avoid any problems under the Voting Rights Act regarding minority representation, would be a system of proportional allocation within these districts. So each party would put up its list of nominees the same way Wyoming currently does nominations for multi-member boards and such. It exists in the statute under the primary provisions. And voters vote for one list, and if the vote is, you know, 60% Republican, 40% Democrat, then you apply that to the number of seats to be elected, and that's how many representatives you get from that district for each party. So this is a plan that is based on a lot of what's going on in the electoral reform community. It's applying it particularly to the geographic concerns that Wyoming has. And I would be happy to answer any questions.
Questions, Mr. Craig? Not seeing it at this time. Anybody else in the audience on that issue? Okay. Next up, public participation in virtual access. I don't know, Senator Case, if you think this is more of a topic for legislative tech facilities and process. I think I do. I'm not sure the Corporations Committee. But if Ms. Lowe, if you want to come back on, third time's a charm, to talk about public participation in virtual access.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, committee members, Jen Lowe, Quality State Policy Center. I agree. I think that this would be better in the other committee, but it was not an option when I was filling out the study topic. So that is why I sent it back to this committee. Basically, there was this sort of theme throughout the budget session that public participation virtually has made it more challenging to conduct meetings. I think it's worthy of looking into this to see if that's true, if the public participation is greater with virtual. I know that in Wyoming, with such a large state, with session being in the middle of winter, being able to participate virtually makes it a lot easier for folks across the state to participate in the governance of the state. So I do think it is worthwhile to look into this topic, whether it's this committee or another. I do ask for your support and stand for any questions.
Questions, committee? I don't know how the Senate worked, but in the House, we did have some difficulty with some chairmen saying they would not take remote participation and some saying they would, and we left it up to the discretion of each committee chairman, which caused some hard feelings out there among members of the public on which meetings they needed to attend in person and which they didn't. Senator Case, thoughts?
Mr. Chairman, I think in the Senate, all the committees did allow for participation, but there was definitely some grumbling, and it was, I think we had the same policy. I think that was a management council policy that was applied to both houses. It is, I mean, we've kind of crossed a Rubicon here, you know, that it's not like we could take this away going forward. So we just have to plan for it, and I think it's an expectation. It pretty much should be universal about all our activities. So maybe, you bet, Mr. Chairman, I'd be happy to take it up with you in the tech process. You're still chairman, right? And so am I.
As far as I know. We didn't meet last year. The council lets us meet this year.
We'll see.
Representative Roscoe.
I just agree with Senator Case that we're not going back, and we had covered some new territory with it. It would really be nice to see what the numbers, the result of the numbers, how many more people were able to watch, and basically how much it might save the state in travel and that. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Senator Scott.
If we get too vigorous on it, what you're going to see is either a great expansion in the sessions, which would be a mistake, or you're going to see the committee chairman killing a lot more bills for lack of time. I know when we got into the crunch time and we had bills, we either were going to let them die or hear them. I had to limit public testimony, and because of the mechanical problems with the online, they were the ones that tended to get limited the most.
Representative Duncan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. To address Senator Scott's comment and concerns, I think you can address that in other ways. You know, how is online any different than the people in the room? I know in my two committees, we actually set a timer and let people know you've got 2 minutes because we have so many people, and actually let the alarm timer go off. And people are really okay with it. At least my experience is they understand the rules from the beginning and everybody's treated the same. So I just think it depends on how you set it up from the beginning.
There are some ways to look at it. Next topic up, ballot order randomization from Representative Burke.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, committee. This is a bill that I brought last year, and the intent of it is to actually bring in more fairness within our election codes. We had Dr. Krosnick from Stanford University actually write up a study he did for the state of Wyoming, and what we call is the ballot order effect is roughly whoever's at the top of the ballot, however the ballot's labeled out, can get anywhere between 2 to 12% of an increase on an election result just by being at the top of the ballot. And what that does is it kind of hurts, you know, those at independents for one are stuck at the bottom of the ballot, and then those that may not necessarily be within a particular party. What this does is it kind of breaks down that, the partisan side of it, and it gives a randomization of, if you have a three-party race, it's kind of hard to say that nowadays, right? But if we have a three-party race, you would have an equal representation of being at the top of the ballot, the middle of the ballot, as well as the bottom of the ballot. And if you have a two-party, then you have 50% of your precincts will be at the top and 50 would be at the bottom. And what we have now is that the way that our current statutes are at, it's kind of an unfair balance of who gets to sit at the top, depending on which precincts you're in. Like I said, there have been a lot of studies on this one. Dr. Krosnick, Jeremy may remember last year actually reported on this. And there have been 13 states around the country that have actually had lawsuits filed on this due to unfair election laws. 12 actually had to, actually lost the lawsuits. One actually settled out of court and actually were able to change their laws on this. So what the intent of the bill is to actually relook at the way that our ballots are set up and to become more fair and equal within the representation of who we have on our ballots. I did speak with the county clerks. Ms. Cindy's here, she may want to speak on this, and we talked about bringing it back in as a topic to look at how our ballots are set up. Take any questions.
So, any questions, committee? So for our good Senate colleagues, it's been really interesting in the House this session, having an independent and a libertarian and a Democrat of the 9 of us, just on somehow the conversations have had a different kind of paradigm on where we are. So whether or not on this topic, I just think we're in for a little more of an interesting interim than I've had on 10 years in corporation when it comes to a lot of these issues, kind of the friendly challenges of why we do things the way we do now that we have multiple parties in the state, or at least elected, and they have a seat at the table and bring in some of these issues of questioning why we do things the way we do. Any questions on ballot order optimization? Senator Case.
I confess, I thought they were randomized, but.
You do.
Yeah. So this is all, I know when you get your example ballot from, when you file, you may or may not be on top, but others, it is, and maybe a clerk could explain that to us real quick.
Sure. Ms. Langford. And I think this bill, we did hear it in the House last year, and it was fascinating having some professors around the country talking about statistics on how to do this. Ms. Langford, welcome.
Good morning. I'm Mary Langford, and I represent the county clerks. During the primary election, the names rotate. They usually start out alphabetically, and they rotate through the different precincts, and with an opportunity for all of those folks to be on the top at some point in time. So it's supposed to be uniform and fair, but that's hard to do in some cases, but try to get as many exposures in the first spot in the list of candidates. In the general election, and I believe that's what this particular topic was about, is that currently the majority party gets the top spot. And those names do not rotate in the general election. So if you're in Wyoming, it's probably Republican on top in almost all counties. And then it's listed that way. So that would be one of the discussions, is to not give party preference to anyone.
Senator Kite.
Yes.
Go ahead. Is that in statute? Yes, Ms. Langford?
Yes, it is.
Did the party getting the highest amount of votes in the county in the last congressional election, is that where it comes from, gets to be the first on the
Mr.
order of
Chairman,
the ballot?
Yes.
Mr. Chairman.
Yep, Mr. Representative Burton.
Thank you. Also with that, the way the statute's set up is, regardless of how many parties we have on the ballot, independents, regardless of where they sit, they're always at the bottom of the ballot. So even if we were to rotate, if you didn't have a major party in the particular race, such as where I came from, then of course we rotate that out. But even within that, independents are still at the bottom of the ballot. So it kind of gives them that they're at the, when you look at it, and you look at a multiple choice of those that aren't really, understanding who's in their race, automatically just by 12 or 20 or 2 to 12%, they're going to pick the top of the ticket, which puts an unfair advantage at those that are independents. What this would do is it doesn't necessarily look at it by party. It actually would randomize all parties, including independents, have an equal chance. And it does actually, give that fair representation to everybody who's running on their ticket.
Okay. You like this independent? No, you don't have to talk, Representative Nebraska. Any other questions on ballot order? Seeing none, next topic, review of governmental publication requirements. Certainly something that I've been working on and heard a lot about with the rise of online newspapers. And Ms. Shikic, welcome if you'd like to give us a 1-minute overview of the topic.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. My name is Mary Lynn Shikic, and I'm here today representing Oil City News LLC, which is part of Upslope Media, working in concert with Sweetwater Now, County 10, County 17, and Cap City News. As we all know, that we're in a new and irreversible trend towards moving towards how we access media, and we've seen it significantly in the state in the last year with some purchases and sold of different news medias. I think it's timely and important that we now consider how we access information as citizens here in Wyoming. And I would submit to you that this might be a topic that would be of interest to your committee, would not take up a significant amount of time, and would be very appropriate given the demographics of this committee. Nostalgia, I think we all have, stepped back to my days as a child working with my 3 brothers, rolling newspapers and delivering them daily throughout the neighborhood. We can respect here that we all, and myself included, really appreciate print media, but the truth of the matter is that we access it in many other different ways aside from just reading the daily newspaper. Having been a student of government here at the legislature for many years, I noticed and observed from the gallery a huge change where typically we would see legislators with newspapers on their desks and looking at them, and to this day, you rarely see one in the paper or on a desk. If you look at this topic, I think you would find that there will be an opportunity to increase the participation of citizens throughout the entire state. I think all of us are interested in public notices, but accessing them from a local newspaper, print paper might be difficult to do. So first and foremost, I hate to use the term, but I think it would increase transparency. At the same time, I think you might find that it would be easier for you as legislators to work and do your work to make sure that you provide the public notices that are needed. A byproduct would be potentially larger competition in the local market with local online news sources, thereby potentially decreasing the costs and resulting in some governmental savings throughout the entire state. So with that, Mr. Chairman, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Questions, Ms. Shikic? And another cut.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for being here. I recall that the Corporations Committee did take this up as an interim corporation bill with no support from the Corporations Committee at the end of the day. I felt like the lone soldier on that and got lots of press about trying to harm the media about that. I was pretty alone, Senator Case. So I don't recall that I had the support of the committee on that bill. And so, I just would urge caution as we move forward on that topic because it's such a sensitive piece. And if we're going to move forward as a committee, that the committee needs to be committed at this time to support the work of the committee. And to support those committee bills. Otherwise, it's all just a lost cause. That was 2 years ago at this point?
Yes.
Died an epic death in the Senate.
If I may, Mr. Chairman, I would say even in the last 2 years, the market has changed dramatically. And just as a result of the pandemic and how you access information has changed dramatically. And I think it's really in the interest of the citizens of the state to be able to actually access public notices and know what's going on. So I do agree with you. I did watch the former Senate File 17 go down pretty dramatically, but I think we really are in a new era. And as I said, I think the demographics of this committee would help you decide on how to potentially craft legislation that might reach all markets and at the same time, the readers who represent the different age groups.
Senator Boner, I think, was next, and then we'll go to Representative Duncan.
And maybe, we might have to take a different approach, I think, and look at it less as competition and maybe expanding the amount of public notices that are available. So instead of not requiring them in newspapers anymore, simply stating that, it may be something that can happen right now. You can offer public notices on these online sources. I'm not sure if we need to require it by statute, but that could be a discussion we have in a way that doesn't gore anybody's ox and look for a way to expand those notices, achieve that goal, but without necessarily doing so in a way that hurts other people.
Thank you, Senator Boner.
Go ahead, Duncan.
Got it.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So this is in the room. The frustration I get is we are taking business away from our newspapers and the cost and all this. So do you see us being able to kind of along the lines of Senator Boner, but do you see the capability of being able, like a municipality, be able to just publish it on their website, and it's up to the, be able to do the digital instead of having to go and pay for the, I don't know what that buzzing is, and pay for it in the media, because that was the biggest pushback, is that the media kept saying, well, this isn't fair, this isn't fair.
Senator Driscoll. Senator Representative Duncan, I think that would be part of the work of the committee to decide. I mean, I think the real question you might want to look here is, how do citizens of Wyoming now access information? And what do we consider a credible resource, I think we traditionally think of newspapers as the most credible resource, but when you look at the reality of it, I am not sure that there is a single newspaper in the state currently that publishes 7 days a week. I think the one that I know is maximum is 5, some of them are 1. So I think we have to figure out, in this changing, evolving communications, gathering information, what would be best for the citizens of Wyoming.
Follow up.
Mr. Chairman, so this bill came forward in the 2021 session. It failed in the Senate by a vote of 9 to 20. So, and those voting against it, we have, members of this committee voting against it. So I think have a battle ahead of us if we choose to take this up. But of course, I have interest in it. The battle is real.
Thank you for your comment. Thank you. Next topic is nonpartisan local elections. Representative Duncan is the contact on it.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The idea is actually changing our county elections to be more like our municipal elections, except maybe the feedback I've gotten is to exclude the county commissioners. But pardon the crassness, but if there's a coroner showing up, that they don't care whether they're an R or a D, or if there's a fight that a sheriff has to break up, truly it doesn't matter whether they're an R or a D. So a lot of these county positions really, an R or a D behind their name doesn't really matter in how they perform. But the feedback I keep getting from different party members as well as public is that county commissioners is an important role that should still have partisanship behind it. So that's my idea is, and I think there's a couple people that want to testify to that.
Gail Simmons. And what's interesting is when I went to look at where this was in statute, I found Wyoming 226117 as the sole reference on partisan election of county offices. It's actually not stated that they will be on anywhere except for when it says it's going to be on a primary partisan ballot. That's the only reference I could find in statute. But more importantly, where the responsibilities of an elected county office are required by law and custom to be agnostic to political party affiliation, and the service to the public is appropriately nonpartisan, then we should explore making those positions nonpartisan. It's not just the sheriff or the coroner. The clerk is the chief elections officer, and I think that seeing things lately, it's pretty clear that that really is critical to be nonpartisan. So all of them, clerk, treasurer, assessor, sheriff, coroner, district attorney, county attorney, clerk of district court. I think it would be worth your while to have them come and say, what is it about their office that might be appropriately partisan? And if there isn't, then why are we making it partisan? Thank you.
Thank you. Further testimony? Okay, seeing none. Next topic, Senator Nethercott. It is your name, but I don't know if you brought it. Review workers' compensation benefits for Wyoming workforce. And we have Tasman Johnson and Marcia Shaner. Ow, I see who it is. All right. Good job of butchering your name, but it's okay.
That's the name I get called when I'm in trouble, Mr. Chairman. Tammy Johnson, Wyoming State AFL-CIO.
Marcia Shaner, Wyoming Trial Lawyers Association.
Welcome.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members.
We brought this to you based on the revelation during the pandemic and even prior to that through some lawsuits that have been filed in the state unsuccessfully for the plaintiffs. The coverage provided to particularly retail workers through the workers' comp system is inadequate. Through this session, some conversations have evolved that revealed that retail workers particularly are typically covered by a private insurance carrier. And the way that those claims are handled and the coverage provided is less than adequate for those workers. And so I think I've had conversations with Representative Ayer and Senator Nethercott, and I can't remember, it was Corporations Committee, I think, when we talked about this earlier in the House Committee, and just felt like the whole system needs a good look. When we passed the presumption for workers' comp for COVID, that did a great deal to help the workers in the state, and then we just felt like it was time to take a deeper dive into it. And Marcia, if you, Mr. Chairman, thank you.
I would only add that we also would like you to maybe consider looking at the mental injury part of the statute, and especially during the pandemic, we've had doctors, ICU nurses, frontline healthcare workers that might benefit by being covered in that section. I think Senator Nethercott has increased coverage for others, but we'd like to see it maybe go a little bit further, and that could be part of the discussion as we look at expansion.
Then, Mr. Chairman, the third topic we listed there was the coverage itself. It's, as you know, I mean, you may know, is 2/3 of the worker's salary up to a cap, and it's the statewide average salary. So it's not, you know, we have many workers that make more than that, but their coverage doesn't extend that. And if you could imagine losing your income because of a workplace injury or even a death, I think the average payout on a death in the state is somewhere around $2,500. And that's if you lose maybe your primary provider for the family. So not that we want to change those particularly, but we just want to look at those and make sure that those coverages are what they should be. It's been a long time since those have been looked at. And so we felt like that is something that's worthy of this committee's study as well. We have also, I think we should say this, we have also submitted this to Judiciary, knowing the pile of topics you guys have before you. So I don't know if Senator Nethercott could weigh in on that as well, where we might be with that.
Senator Nethercott.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yes, I believe this is a topic that's been submitted to both committees. The issue was presented as really the lack of insurance or workers' compensation coverage to those retail employees in the state, recognizing really what the references into those retail employees were grocery store workers, is my understanding, all belonging to large, really international corporations who have private insurance coverage for workers' compensation and choose not to participate in Wyoming workers' compensation. And that's served to be inadequate. And so understanding how that may or may not look differently, curious that the Department of Insurance is here in the room, and maybe how this might intersect into some of their roles and any provisions that they understand or monitor, or if that's all within the Department of Workforce Services. Just kind of a curious intersect there to understand. For maybe which committee might be more appropriate.
Mr. Chairman, Senator Nethercott, It really does fall under workforce services. We have really no involvement with workers' comp.
Thank you. Senator Scott.
Chairman, this is classically been field. And we're responsible for most of the legislation that's on the books now.
Further questions? Answers? Got one. Okay, thank you. Senator Case.
Can I get a mic? There you go. Senator Scott, if it's classically labor, health, and I certainly agree, but would they take it? Has it been submitted to them? How does it get there? And you're not on it anymore, so.
Yeah.
Is anybody on it?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, Senator Case, I'm on it, and we're going to meet on Thursday, and I'm not sure if it's on the listed interim topics or not.
We'll do a re-referral.
Mr. Chairman,
Senator,
if I can, I think it's a topic that can apply to 3 of the committees within the legislature. Even minerals, most appropriately minerals, I think. You know, and particularly when we look at some of the experience of the members of this committee or even the number 1 committee, certainly appropriate to be within either of those committees. So I would just say, yeah, committee number 10 certainly has it, but I know committee number 10 is overworked and underpaid.
Mr. Chairman, correct me if I'm wrong, but can't management council just looks at all of these and they can redistribute how they see fit?
not only can they will.
Okay.
Senator Scott.
System is to keep the lawyers out of it.
Thank you. Now we're on to a favorite topic, Senator Case, electricity markets,
The doctors who get paid are the ones who should be on.
prices, competition, and more. We
So-
want to know about the more in particular.
Well, Mr. Chairman, there's, you know, we all know that the electricity landscape in the country is changing, that Wyoming's a very integral part of that. We've traditionally been a provider of coal-fired electricity and coal to other generating plants. The whole world's changing. There's a lot more renewables. There's a lot more angst about what we do with our fossil fuel generating units. And we've seen efforts towards privatization. We've seen efforts towards opening markets to allow people to subscribe to those sources of power. We've had competition about territories. You know, the utility industry is somewhat more becoming more fragmented with independent power producers, and possibly some of those would use fossil fuel plants. The territorial integrity, PSC issues, things in California with a desire to regulate and dispatch our power in the Western grid. The Southwest Power Pool is the former chairman of the Public Service Commission is now works for the Southwest Power Pool. They have ideas about Wyoming and becoming RTO possibly. And so it's just a huge market. I think we should, or a huge issue, we should stay on top of it. It's important that we have the expertise in this committee to be able to kind of work through these issues as they come up. I left taxes off this list. I think that is going to be on the Revenue Committee's docket is the taxes, but the policy with respect to things like competition, independent generation, subscription to power, protecting ratepayers from inappropriate subsidies to maybe keep fossil fuel plants going. All these things are really important for us, and I would hope we'd work with the PSC and just keep this topic on our docket as it develops through the year.
Another comment.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. Senator Case and Senator Scott, former chairman of this committee, Senator Case, if you can speak to the history of this topic being in front of the Corporations Committee, I think that'd be helpful for the public and the new committee members to understand the history of this topic being before the Corporations Committee and its appropriateness before this committee, if you can.
Mr. Chairman.
Senator Scott.
Mr. Chairman, This,
What just happened? I'm sorry.
What just happened? I looked across.
okay, Mr. Chairman, this is one of the fundamental topics of this committee, and I think we ought to have this in some form on our agenda. We're going to have, amongst other things, issues on carbon capture and sequestration and how they can function on the power plants. Whether that comes to this committee, or I have no idea, but it's going to be an issue next time, and I think for the foreseeable future. This is where we can make a big difference.
Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So we've typically worked with the Public Service Commission and been tightly connected with that entity, probably starting back in the telecommunications days, but increasingly in the energy areas as that's become paramount. I think other committees, such as minerals, they approach it more towards carbon issues and perhaps economic development issues. I think we kind of have the high ground here. Revenue, that's a good place for the tax discussion, and we do have to think about the taxes on all forms of electrical generation. But this is really the home committee, and I hope we will maintain that.
Rest assured we will, I think.
Yeah.
Further comments? Representative Clausen.
Just in support of this topic, we're dealing with territory issues, the carbon capture, pump storage, the switching of fuels. I think it's paramount, tip of the spear issue for Wyoming. I'd like to look into this.
It's kind of nuts and bolts, this committee. So we'll keep moving. We're going to get short on time. Next, Representative Ayer, vacancies in elected office.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Actually, Ms. Simons would be able to speak to this issue. I think it is a factor right now in people's mind because we just went through this process, and then I think that some people didn't work as well as we. There was some consternation about that process. So maybe something we could take a look at. Gail can
Mr. Chairman?
enlighten us further.
Gail Simmons. So vacancies within a few months of a general election should be managed differently than vacancies in office where there's over a year remaining. And the idea here is that incumbency provides a significant advantage in elections. So participation of the electorate in selecting individuals or nominating individuals to fill those vacancies is absolutely critical. And at a minimum, proportional representation should be embedded in the process of selecting proposed appointees or selectees. We are proportional when we are voting for the top 5 electeds. We are proportional in voting for representatives, state representatives and senators, and for federal. So the idea of not having that carried into the vacancy process, and there's been a number of cases lately, quite a bit of furor over filling a vacancy in a county commissioner in Campbell County. And I was a witness to the process that occurred just recently for the filling the vacancy of State Superintendent of Public Instruction. And so I have firsthand view of the need for changing this and making sure that it's representative.
Thank you. Question, Ms. Simons? Questions? Thank you. Anyone else like to comment on this topic? Thank you. Next topic is Representative Duncan, elected county offices partisanship. And Ms. Simons, you're still on.
Mr. Chairman, we pretty much already covered this.
Very good.
Yep.
We'll flip right through it. Senator Case, multi-member districts, ranked choice voting. We've got a bunch of those. We kind of talked about it. Pass on through. That'll be a topic. Okay, on to a fun one now. Representative Burt, medical cannabis. Away
Thank
we
you,
go.
Mr.
Horses
Thank you,
out
Mr.
of the
Chairman,
barn.
committee. So this is gonna be a fun little one here. As we've known that the medical cannabis conversations come up a little bit more frequently here in the last couple of years. And with that, the reason we're trying to bring it to the Corporations Committee is two reasons. One, with the implementation of it, instead of trying to develop a whole new agency, we would like to go through the liquor division on trying to get things actually moving on that. And then the other side is the regulatory practices. So we've looked at the revenue side, and then we also looked at the health, but we looked at, as a whole, the corporations and what we do here would be a better option. So why are we bringing it? To be honest, we want to have the discussion where we want to make sure that we can get patients and doctors at that conversation. In full disclosure, we do have 2 ballot initiatives. One of those ballot initiatives on the ground as of right now is medical cannabis, that we are knocking doors and we're going throughout the state to collect those signatures. And I think just by automatically, shutting down the conversation and not having the conversation because of, excuse me, because of where we may be sitting in a difference, excuse me, where we may be sitting in differences, I think the topic should be looked at from the legislative side of it, moving the ship forward versus, letting it go and not addressing the concerns or hearing what's going on, and then let the ballot initiative go through, and then bringing it back to the legislative body to where we have to try to get caught up to once the ballot initiative is passed by the people. So one way or the other, the conversation is going to continue, and I would like to have the legislative body get ahead of it, help get things moving so we don't look at some of the downfalls and the pitfalls we've seen in some of the surrounding states. I don't want to take up all the time. I do have 2 speakers here. I've got Christine Stinquist, who is a patient advocate that she's helped me. I'm sure many of you have probably talked with her throughout the last couple of years. She'll have some testimony here as well, and then also with the liquor division representative, if you would like to speak, Mike Mosier, on their aspects on the liquor division, on why we'd go through them on the regulatory process. And then once they're done, I'll stand for any other questions if there are any.
Perfect, thank you. Ms. Sundquist?
The organization Truce, Together for Responsible Use in Cannabis Education. I am an educator. I also am a brain tumor patient who has found benefit from medical cannabis. I met Representative Burt at one of my events that I had hosted for our veterans to discuss this topic, and he was kind enough to join us and share some stories with me about his fellow soldiers who have struggled with PTSD. I am here to encourage the body to take on this topic. It is coming, and what we're seeing out in the field as we're collecting signatures is a very warm response. But inevitably, we need your guidance. We need to put in all the regulatory aspects of this program. Whether a ballot initiative is passed or not, it does need to come back to our legislative body. And so I'm hoping that you will start taking on this topic, discussing it, and really doing what's best for Wyoming. And that's really all.
Any question, Ms. Sundquist? Thank you. Mr. Mosier, did you have anything to say? We don't need you to, but.
We don't have a position.
Perfect. Representative Burt, follow up.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And again, committee, I think we're just having the discussion again, whether we accept it, whether we don't accept it, whether we partake, whether we don't partake, that's not the discussion. It's having the foresight of getting the legislation correct so that when we get the final ballot, if it comes through, that we are at the spearhead, and that we do make sure that, with it coming, that we can actually address those concerns, and that we, put Wyoming and the residents of Wyoming ahead.
Thank you. Then we've got 2 topics in a row coming. Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry. Excuse me.
Sorry, Mr. Chairman. My name is Apollo Pizzelli. I'm with OMS Campaigns, and I'm assisting the ballot initiative. And I just wanted to give an update on that. It might be beneficial while you're considering this topic. We have until January of 2023 to submit the signatures. 33% of the signatures on both ballot initiatives have already been collected. 60% of the signatures that have been gathered have come from Republican households. Republicans have given us a warmer response than the Democratic households, surprisingly enough. So this issue is very likely coming. And we are seeing an issue with the initiative being it's a single issue initiative, so we're not able to comprehensively address all of the needs at the regulatory level. So we do hope that there is some legislation so that this doesn't take up significantly more time as it has in other states trying to fix the initiative, which is only a single issue topic. Thank you.
Thank you. Further? Okay, next two topics both deal with PBMs and the pharmacies. Saw Ms. Day back here somewhere. You'd like to come up, this is under Duncan's, but I assume you're good with them presenting. Duncan? Welcome.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. My name is Heather Roday, representing Blue Cross Blue Shield of Wyoming. We submitted the interim topic request for PBMs based on previous and successful experience with this topic in this committee. When we did this, we indicated that there was a wide scope, and we've slept since then. So we've got some ideas about ways to limit it to pharmacy market trends, purchasing practices, reimbursement, and contracting. So these four topics get at the most concerning topics of the previous bill that was reviewed earlier, and they provide a more limited approach, but still provides a method for continued conversations with a larger set of stakeholders. So I stand for any questions.
Questions? Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, Mike Mosier, Not Liquor, Cigna, and I would like to address the process on this. I thank the good representative for bringing these issues out. As you know, this has been a topic of discussion, as having been a veteran of several rounds of PBM discussions through this fine Corporations Committee, the first in 2015 and the first in 2019. It was done through a task force or working group or whatever you want to call it. Now, as I look at the list, it's a fairly expansive list, and it gave me kind of a headache just looking at it. There are, I think, specific issues that can be addressed. For example, addressing rural independent pharmacies versus chain pharmacies, because there is a rural healthcare component in a lot of your communities. You don't want to lose those pharmacies. Is there a way we can address those separately? Audits, drug purchasing practices, there's a number of things. However, when we did that in 2015, the working group consisted of 4 different pharmacy associations, 3 to 4 PBMs, health insurance companies, the manufacturers, pharma, but also the unsung hero of those meetings was Representative Dan Kirkbride, who manages to suffer through these horribly boring, at least to me, meetings. We came out, committee, with a product that everyone supported both times. In 2015, we did licensure, we did regulation of PBMs, we did MAC list revisions. It wasn't fun, but we got there. Now, my role was sort of as an in-between. I have represented pharmacies in the past for almost a decade, PBMs, insurance companies, and I can comfortably say no one in this chain wants independent pharmacies to suffer, but we also don't want the patient or our customers to suffer either. So if we do delve deeper than a single bill, for example, addressing individuals versus chains, I would suggest the system that's worked in the past, and that's forming out of a task force we met with in the Department of Insurance under Mr. Rood's able tutelage and supervision. It wasn't fun, but what you ended up with is, instead of hours and hours and hours of Corporations Committee testimony, you ended up with us showing up saying, here you go. And so that would be my suggestion, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. If we do decide to delve deeper, give it to the people to take care of it and see if we can find middle ground. We've done it several times before. Chairman Scott will remember when we did biosims once in his committee. And that, once again, that was a collaborative effort where everybody got together ahead of time, agreed on language, and gave you the product and explained it. And so with that, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, I'll be happy to take questions.
Question, Mr. Mosier. Representative Ayer.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think with this bill that was before us this time, we have some momentum in this area, some momentum. I was just curious, in the past, has it always been the Corporations Committee that dealt with this issue, or has Labor Health had a hand in that as well?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Ayer, it's always been the Corporations Committee. You guys have purview over insurance. The only time we worked through labor was on a specific type of drug, which was biosimilar products. And so that's always been Corporations Committee. And I would prefer that to be, I mean, it fits. And we love you guys.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Mosier and Mrs. Day, what about revenue as well? Because I know this has been submitted to revenue as well. How would it fit in revenue?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Duncan, I don't really see it fitting in revenue. I could be wrong. I mean, obviously revenue is involved, but it's an insurance issue. And so that's you guys. So love it or hate it, get bored to death, but I think it's always been in corporations, and my feeling is it should stay here.
Further questions? Representative Clausen.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Mosier, in your testimony, you kind of inferred, I guess I'm trying to read between the lines here, that independent pharmacies are important for rural areas, but we shouldn't worry about any independent pharmacies or competition in urban areas. I just expound a little bit for my own curiosity there.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Clausen, all pharmacies are important. However, the concerns I hear across the field are losing small pharmacies that are in your rural areas, so your constituents don't have to drive 100 miles to find a pharmacy. And so even though all pharmacies are important and a vital part of the supply chain, I think, at least what I hear from most of you all, is the biggest concern is about your local pharmacy.
Any questions? Thank you.
Thank you.
Next topic is Representative Roscoe. Active Transportation Recreational Grant Program. I think that's going to go to TRW, but you can go ahead and present.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It is over in TRW, and I talked to them this morning about it. But I would like to take my minute, if I could, in case somebody is online and would like to talk about it. But this is just getting back to a bill I tried to pass this year, House Bill 144, and it's about pathways and access to safe walkways around schools and downtowns. A lot of work has already been done on this. I don't think it would take much work for the committee to take a look at it. And we get a little more information. There was a survey of the whole state about projects that different towns and counties are interested in. And it was just all over the state, there were projects that are waiting for funding. And it would go into an existing YDOT program, grant program, and then a little bit into the state parks program too. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mine that's been covered. We'll move on from it to review a Uniform Unclaimed Property Act. You have Ms. Williams here, or there we go. I think this came straight out of the Treasurer's office, so welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Treasurer. Jeff Robertson, I'm the Administrator of Unclaimed Property with the Treasurer's Office, and appreciate you taking this under consideration today. Just a little history, unclaimed property in Wyoming was enacted in 1993, and that was based on 1981 Unified Act at the time. Since that period of time, there's been a few Band-Aids put in place to help us get through this point, but there's also been 2 more Unified Acts that have come through, the most recent in 2016. Some of the technology that we've seen since that period of time include things as email notifications for businesses before they have to turn it over to the state. And then more recently, definition of virtual currency and how that's handled as far as unclaimed property. So we'd like to just take a look at this, help us to return small claims to people a little easier, not as cumbersome, address these other issues, and just bring us more up to date. I'm here for any questions.
Okay. down to a couple of pages left. We have transparency and utility and industrial permitting. Senator Case.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think Crystal McDowell, is she around? Is she online? Okay. Mr. Chairman, what this gets at is the use of filings at the Public Service Commission that are under protective order. This would be just kind of proposed to review when we make these filings, when we protect them. It is interesting that you often find out about things way too late to do anything about them. Utilities certainly have some reasons that they can want things to be protected, but there should be standards, and we could look into that a bit more. A case in point, for example, we recently found out about Rocky Mountain Power's proposals for very large pumped hydro storage facilities in Wyoming. Before they had talked about kind of a battery wind farm strategy, and then they sort of shifted to this pumped hydro. But the reason we found out about it, it was in the FERC register, and it was actually, it showed up being published by FERC, Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, in the Douglas budget. So just kind of how we get our arms around what's protected and what's not, and if it should be protected. I'm not saying that it shouldn't be. I'd just like to learn more about the criteria for that. It's really important as this utility landscape changes and the major players are possibly using protective orders to not tell us what they're up to.
Thank you.
It could fit into the electricity topic. You could roll it up in there.
I think that's real well.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I don't know if my sponsor's here that, well, the guy that, Richard Garrett, that sponsored it, but I have a concern about maternal health, and just with the pandemic, I know I have a lot of constituents that suffered with mental health, postpartum, trying to keep their jobs, and it's just looking at extending that in statute. And I just think that's something important that possibly this committee could look at. Thank you.
Questions, committee? I think you're on labor health here instead of labor health because of, okay. You have the floor, Senator Scott.
Mr. Chairman, as I've been listening to these things, I've divided into three categories, key topics that are central to this committee, some minor issues that we could handle traditionally would, but could be handled with private bills if need be, and a couple of major issues that could come here, could go elsewhere. So, Mr. Chairman, if it's all right, what I'd suggest in the two major topics that are, I think, clearly within our jurisdiction. One is the electricity item, and we've talked about that. Second is all the various housing issues and how that interplays with local government and local development and that sort of thing. The major issues that could go elsewhere are the pharmacy benefit manager issues, partly related to this year's Senate File 36. We've really got to take a look at what the problem is. What's the definition of the problem we're trying to solve, Mr. Chairman? And some look at what can we solve as opposed to what's federal that we can't touch. I think that was a source of confusion in this year's legislation. And then Mr. Mosier had, I think, a constructive suggestion to how to proceed in some of the issues, Mr. Chairman. And the second one on that list of major ones that could go here elsewhere is the workers' comp issue. Particularly, I think there's some retail coverage and other coverages where workers' comp is not necessarily the insurer, but maybe should be. And so looking at that set of issues, Mr. Chairman, and there's several committees that could go to, but this is one of them. And then 3 minor issues, the traditional election code issues, Secretary of State's office and the county clerks, they always find something, either in a court decision somewhere or something that didn't work in the election. Second is the telecommunications sunset date. Again, that classically would be here. That's not as important in program as it used to be by any means, but there's some important aspects that could come here. It could be a private bill. And third are the insurance code issues. And I remember the anti-rebate statutes. And there may be some other things that come up, Mr. Chairman. So that would give us an outline of what we could do. And then goodness knows what management council might also have.
Senator Scott, that was very close to what I had. I had almost the same list, minor issues, major. The minor ones are kind of what was brought to us. I think unless someone wants to remove something, those I've got down, the medical malpractice, the sunset, the anti-rebate, unclaimed property, the election code. Someone wants to pull them. Otherwise, those are kind of minor issues. Senator Nethercott.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I would say issues brought to us by either the Department of Insurance or the Secretary of State would be considered minor issues, even though they might be in substantively major due to the subject matter expertise and their relationship with this committee. I think for our purposes of our work, they're considered minor for our workload, and I would support taking them up and working with those agencies.
Thank you. So we've got those, and those will just stand unless someone wants to try to remove or argue with them. I'd like to leave the utility and electricity and that end of it with Senator Case as wide open as possible if management council wants to rein us in. But I'd like to see that basically from C to C, basically, so that we can take up what we need, because we've got numbers of issues there that can be addressed. Does that suit you, Senator Case? That's kind of your bailiwick, and I'd really like to leave them wide open. Same way with workforce housing. If someone wants to argue against it, I think that topic should be one. And these are ones that are going to take either 3 or 4 meetings and 2 or 3 hours at each meeting. These are going to be hardcore, serious topics. If everyone's all right with those two, that kind of leaves us down to PBMs and the workers' comp. And I'd like to see us take up the PBMs. I actually listened to the labor health take that issue up. Didn't feel like the interim that they really honestly got it fleshed out well. And I think this committee has a history and should take it up. Thoughts, committee?
Mr. Chairman.
Another cop.
So I don't necessarily want to take it up, but I think that we need to take it up. And I do think, as Senator Case indicated, or Senator Scott indicated, committee number 10 was a good committee, but I think the scope and magnitude of that bill is so important that actually having 2 committees consecutively work on it and get that wider swath of legislative work in the interim and knowledge, I think is prudent for the people of the state of Wyoming and all the pharmacists and patients out there. So I do think it's important that we take it up and because it's not going to go away. And so we should take the time and effort to get it solved.
I'll second that. I think, healthcare is only a tiny piece of the PBM. The truth is the real guts where the problem lays is a corpse issue, not a health issue. And so I think it's exceptionally appropriate for this committee. Representative Duncan.
Boy, we're having trouble with these mics. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I agree wholeheartedly about the PBM. I think we look at it as a licensure, regulation, insurance aspect versus labor health took a different approach. And I think they got us to a good spot to where we're being able to focus a little more and identify where the problem is. And I think the suggestion of a task force or a subcommittee and maybe combine us with some of those that actually were on the other one might be a good starting place. And then
just piggybacking on what you were, I have a top three of workforce, power markets, and elections.
Mr.
Read it
Chairman?
back to me one more time.
I had a top three, Mr. Chairman, of workforce, housing, power markets, and elections. Those were my
I'm in
top.
agreement other than elections. I've had about enough for now, but I'll stand with the committee on however they'd like to be. Representative Roscoe.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Since elections is in our title of our committee, I would put that up at the top, and I think it could include a lot of the different things that were brought up. Open primaries, ranked choice, and also I think we should throw in this. If we're going to look at it at all, we should look at it as an independent commission for redistricting. We should look at it this time, or it'll just get lost. And I do think it's important.
Open
Thank you,
debate.
Mr. Chairman.
Committee thoughts? I'm a no, Senator Scott. Let's kind of go through just real quick, yes or no on a couple issues. Let's talk about runoffs and let's talk about elections in general. We'll just start with Representative Burt and make a quick run around the table.
Mr. Chairman? Mr. Chairman? I think you missed one topic on the last page, just so you're aware. How to get fair market value for retail liquor licenses. It's on the last page of your packet.
Oh, I don't have that. I'm sorry about that. I didn't even see it. That's Walters. I don't know who's here to address it, even anyone on the committee. I apologize. My book was earlier than that.
Mr. Chairman, I can address this. I was
Please.
looking, it's in my packet, but not in yours, Mr. Chairman. So it is the issue about fair market value for retail liquor licenses in communities where demand is greater than available licenses. This is a topic that I hear concerns from constituents and community leaders probably every 3 weeks. I hear concern about this and how maybe unworkable the current state of affairs is. So I think it is time for an overhaul, Mr. Mosier.
That's why I just winged him up and can I interrupt you just a little?
Yeah, I'm done.
I think it's worthy of a topic, just liquor licenses in general, and take a look, once again, a little bit broader going in, but this is a piece of it. Mr. Mosier.
Mr. Chairman, Wyoming State Liquor Association, I know of the issue. I haven't seen Representative Walters' proposal. We've addressed this issue with bar and grill licenses. We've tweaked the formula twice with legislation in past years. As far as addressing blue sky, bear in mind the vast majority of cities don't have a blue sky value on liquor licenses. And for example, in Laramie County, we've got over 50 full retail liquor licenses just laying around waiting for somebody that wants them. And so it's specific communities. Now, do we need an interim topic on that, or do I need to sit down with WHAM and just, we can talk it over? Because it may be just as simple, for example, as tweaking the formula a little bit if that's the issue. The idea of the bar and grill license, which we invented back in 2008, I'm looking at the ones who've been around that long. We've tweaked that formula twice, and if that is what they're looking for, but I'm not sure how you address blue sky value on a business investment, which is essentially what I think this is addressing. So I don't know if it needs to be an interim topic. My friends at WHAM and us have a very good dialogue together, and so we can work on that individually and see what we can come up with.
Committee, maybe a minor topic of a 30-minute to an hour update. Representative Duncan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have a question. So do we really need to limit the retail liquor license anymore?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Duncan, how much time do you have left?
We're down to 10 minutes.
Briefly, there are reasons. I mean, for example, people have made investments in those licenses, but on the other hand, demographically and economically, you don't want a saturation of full retail licenses. when we came up with the bar and grill license through the Corporations Committee, if I remember correctly, the idea was that's where the real growth pattern was. Full retail is more of a bar and packaged liquor store. And with packaged liquor stores, you've got a saturated market and you're just splitting the pie in smaller pieces. With bar and grills, it does fill a niche. Most communities have bar and grills laying around. But that's just, I think it's an issue we overall need to continue to address and evolve. But there are a lot of economic development issues, for example, with saturation of full retail liquor licenses. So I'm certainly happy to discuss liquor issues. They're a lot more interested in PBM issues.
Senator Nethercott.
Mr. Chairman, thanks. Just Representative Walters' submission states that the city of Casper is committed to helping write this bill and do all of the work all the legwork that minimizes the amount of time needed. Therefore, the time commitment would be reviewing the bill submitted and edited by LSO, discussing in committee possible editing and filing it in for the Senate, for the House. So in light of Mr. Mosher's comments, I think he can work with the city of Casper, and we can see that presented to the committee. Free retail licenses.
Well, that's kind of what I was coming to. That's a minor topic for maybe 30 minutes from now.
Mr. Chairman, Senator Nethercutt, I agree, but I would rather work with WHAM as a whole because we need to find solutions that work for the entire state.
Thank you. All right, we're back on it. We've got about 10 minutes left to come up with our topics. Representative.
Just before you start that on elections and where everybody's thought is, I think we need to include the workers' compensation issue as at least a minor topic.
Is a minor.
It's a major topic.
Or a major, okay, I'll go with that.
Let's leave it there, and unless there's objection by the committee, management council will sort a little on it. We'll let Senator Nethercott present because they're going to do some sorting for us. So we're really down to the deal, and we're out of time for everybody to comment, but elections is probably going to be there, and management council can deal with it. We had enough topics on it, and I think that pretty well gets us through our list. Senator Scott.
Thinking of a motion to, I think we've got a pretty good consensus, a motion to have the chairman put it together and present it to the management council.
Thank you, and we'll try to hit the committee a little bit so we know kind of where we're at going. Well, because it's got to be prioritized going into management council, and we'll come pull you on that. And for any of you who've got stuff that matters, we'll sit down and work with everybody. It's, I think we're well within the purview of 3 or 4 meetings to get through what we've put up. So, further comments for the good, Representative Duncan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. In the past, we just basically went through and individually, we ranked top 4, whatever, and gave it to the chairman and went from there.
I'm happy with that if that's what you want to do. Bring us your top 4, minors will stand. If that's what you want, bring it. So bring us top 4 if that's what you want. We'll do the best we can. The minors will all stand. Thank you. I think we're done.